and then they had to abort mission, and the driver came up on the circle driveway instead, and then they went out the front door.
What if I told you this entire case changed because of a message no one was ever supposed to see? Not a public statement.
Plan to pull the car around back, and then they had to abort mission, and the driver came up on the circle driveway instead, and then they went out the front door.
What if I told you this entire case changed because of a message no one was ever supposed to see? Not a public statement. Not an official report, but something far more dangerous. A note, quietly delivered directly into the hands of the FBI, and suddenly, everything shifted.
The initial plan to pull the car around back, and then they had to abort mission, and the driver came up on the circle driveway instead, and then they went out the front door.
What if I told you this entire case changed because of a message no one was ever supposed to see? Not a public statement. Not an official report, but something far more dangerous. A note, quietly delivered directly into the hands of the FBI, and suddenly, everything shifted. Because up until that moment, the disappearance of Nancy Guthrie felt like just another cold case fading into silence. But then this message surfaced. No name, no return trace. Just one chilling line that insiders refused to repeat on record. And here's where it gets uncomfortable. If this was just a random act, then why did the note reference details that were never released to the public? Details that only someone on the inside or someone who was there could possibly know? So, let me ask you this. Was this a warning? A confession? Or something even worse? Proof that the truth has been sitting in plain sight this entire time? Because sources are now quietly suggesting this wasn't the beginning of the news. It was the moment someone decided to stop hiding it. The moment that note reached the FBI, everything that looked quiet on the surface started moving underneath. Not publicly, but in the kind of controlled silence that usually means one thing: something serious just changed. Because up until then, the disappearance of Nancy Guthrie in Tucson had already started fading into a familiar pattern. Another case, another timeline, another unanswered question slowly getting buried under newer headlines. But insiders now claim the note didn't just add information. It reframed the entire situation. And here's why that matters. Nancy Guthrie wasn't just another name in a report. She lived in a quiet neighborhood. Predictable routine. No obvious reason to vanish without a trace. Which is exactly what made her case so unsettling. Because when someone like that disappears, it forces a different kind of question. If nothing was wrong, then what went so right for whoever planned it? And that's where things start getting uncomfortable. Before the note ever appeared, investigators were already dealing with a scene that didn't behave the way it should. No signs of struggle. No chaotic disruption. No clear indication of forced entry. Instead, everything felt controlled. Too controlled. It was as if whatever happened fast, clean, and without leaving behind the kind of noise these cases usually carry. And that's exactly the kind of situation where specialists get involved. Not the ones you see on camera. Not the ones giving press statements. The ones who work close to the ground, literally. That's where Maureen O'Connell enters the picture. A former member of the Evidence Response Team, FRD. An elite unit called in when evidence is fragile, timing is critical, and mistakes aren't an option. She wasn't there to speculate. She wasn't chasing theories. Her entire career was built on one thing: finding what everyone else walks past. So when drone footage from Nancy Guthrie's property started circulating online, most people watched it the same way they always do. They looked for movement, entry points, anything obvious. But Maureen O'Connell didn't watch it like that. She slowed it down, frame by frame. And instead of focusing on what was there, she focused on what wasn't. Because sometimes absence tells a louder news than presence. And what she noticed was subtle. So subtle, most people didn't even register it. The driveway, not the back gate, not the windows, not the doors, the driveway. At first glance, it looked ordinary. Just another residential layout designed for convenience. But under a forensic lens, it became something else entirely. A controlled pathway, a system, a space where movement could happen without interruption. And that's when she saw it. Not multiple tracks, not scattered impressions, just one. A single, consistent set of tire impressions. No overlap, no variation, no signs of hesitation. Just one vehicle moving in a way that felt almost deliberate. Now think about that for a second. In a case surrounded by uncertainty, speculation, and noise, one clean pattern stands out more than anything else. Because chaos leaves marks. Mistakes leave traces. But this looked like something that didn't allow room for either. And suddenly, the narrative starts shifting. Because if there was only one vehicle, then we're not looking at randomness anymore. We're looking at precision. And precision raises a different kind of question. Was this planned from the beginning, or executed by someone who knew exactly what they were doing? That's where the structure of the property starts to matter. Nancy Guthrie's home wasn't built like a typical straight entry layout. It had a circular driveway, a looping design that allowed a vehicle to enter, move through, and exit without ever needing to reverse. No awkward turns, no wasted seconds, just one smooth motion. And in a situation where time equals exposure, that design isn't just convenient, it's strategic. Because a vehicle could pull in, stop briefly, and leave without drawing attention. Clean, efficient, almost invisible. And according to Moore and O'Connell's assessment, that's exactly what may have happened. Not presented as a dramatic claim, not exaggerated for effect, but as a conclusion built from years of reconstructing scenes where every second matters. She believes the vehicle used in Nancy Guthrie's disappearance was positioned right there, in that front circular driveway. And that single detail changes everything. Because now, the front of the property isn't just part of the setting. It becomes the focal point. The place where something critical may have happened in plain sight, without anyone realizing it. But here's where the news takes an even sharper turn. Because while everyone was focused on how controlled the movement looked, Moore and O'Connell started asking a different question. What if something interrupted it? Not enough to cause chaos, but enough to force a decision. And that's where one unexpected detail enters the picture. A nearby dog. It sounds minor, almost irrelevant. But in a quiet neighborhood, it isn't. Because dogs don't ignore disruptions. They react. Loudly. Suddenly. Unpredictably. And sometimes that's all it takes. One bark. One noise. And suddenly, lights turn on. Windows open. Attention shifts. And in a moment where staying unseen is everything, even a small disruption can create risk. According to Moore and O'Connell, it's possible that something like this may have altered the original movement. Not stopped it, but changed it. Because if the initial plan involved a different exit, that plan may not have held. Instead, the front driveway could have become a fallback. A fast adjustment. A controlled pivot in a situation that suddenly demanded speed. And if that's true, then what looked like a perfectly executed sequence may actually be the result of a split-second decision. Which raises another question entirely. How much of this was planned, and how much was improvised? Because those are two very different scenarios. One suggests preparation, the other suggests adaptability. And both are equally unsettling. But the deeper Moore and O'Connell's analysis goes, the more one detail keeps coming back into focus. Not the vehicle itself, not the timing, the ground beneath it, because the driveway wasn't made of solid concrete. It was composed of decomposed granite, a loose, granular surface, the kind that doesn't just support movement, it records it. Under the right conditions, it can capture impressions subtle, detailed, and incredibly valuable. But there's a problem. It doesn't hold them for long. Every step disturbs it. Every passing vehicle alters it. Even the environment, wind, air, natural movement, can erase what was once clearly there. Which means the window to capture that evidence is incredibly small. And once it's gone, it's gone. And that's where the tension in this case begins to build. Because if a vehicle really was there, if it left behind a pattern that could be measured, analyzed, and traced, then one question becomes unavoidable. Was it ever properly documented? Or did the most important piece of evidence disappear before anyone realized what they were looking at? And that's where the news stops feeling like a mystery and starts feeling like something much more uncomfortable. Because once you accept the possibility that a critical piece of evidence may have existed on that driveway, the next question hits harder. Was it missed, or was it never prioritized in time? And that distinction? It changes everything. Because according to internal whispers and off-record conversations, the early hours of the scene were far from controlled. People moving in and out, vehicles passing through, a space that wasn't instantly locked down the way you would expect in a high-risk disappearance. Now imagine that. A surface like decomposed granite, fragile, temporary, easily disturbed, being exposed to even minimal activity before proper documentation. It doesn't take much. One step, one tire, one shift in the surface, and suddenly, what could have been a clear pattern turns into noise. And noise doesn't lead anywhere. But here's where things take a sharper, more controversial turn. Because when Maureen O'Connell reviewed the publicly available footage, she wasn't just looking for evidence. She was looking for process, signs that the right steps were taken, the kind of methodical, almost obsessive procedures that define forensic recovery. Low-angle inspection, measurement scales placed precisely alongside impressions. Careful, controlled lighting sweeping across the surface. Not dramatic, not cinematic, but essential. And what she didn't see stood out more than anything else. No visible technicians working close to the ground. No clear use of forensic markers. No indication that the driveway, arguably one of the most critical zones, was being systematically processed for tire impressions. Now, to be fair, Maureen O'Connell didn't jump to conclusions. She acknowledged the possibility that this work may have happened earlier, before cameras arrived, before drones started capturing overhead views. But her conclusion remained careful and precise. Based on what's publicly visible, there is no confirmation that it happened. And that's where the tension starts building. Because in a case like this, maybe isn't enough. Not when timing is everything. Not when evidence doesn't wait. And definitely not when a single impression could have changed the entire direction of the investigation. Because here's what most people don't realize. Tire impressions aren't just marks. They're data. Structured. Measurable. Traceable. Under the right conditions, they can reveal the type of vehicle, the category of tire, even subtle wear patterns unique to a specific wheel. And once that information is extracted, it triggers a chain reaction. Vehicle type leads to surveillance footage. Surveillance footage leads to movement patterns. Movement patterns connect to real-world individuals. It's not instant, but it's powerful. And it all starts with one thing: a preserved impression. So, if that impression existed, and if it wasn't captured in time, then the investigation didn't just lose a clue. It may have lost a starting point. And that's a very different kind of problem. But just when it feels like the news is circling around what might have been missed, another detail enters the picture. One that shifts the focus away from the property entirely. A black glove, discovered nearly 2 miles from Nancy Guthrie's home. At first, it seemed like just another object. Random, disconnected, easy to overlook. But then the details started coming out. The glove closely resembled the one seen in nearby doorbell footage. Footage that had already drawn attention for capturing a shadowy figure moving through the area. Not clearly identified, not confirmed, but enough to raise questions. And when that glove was processed, it revealed something that immediately escalated the situation. DNA, not Nancy's, not and publicly connected to her. An unknown male profile. And suddenly, the case expands. Because now we're not just dealing with a disappearance. We're dealing with a biological